Two social workers on a mission to change the narrative, Millennial Babes Podcast seeks to empower others in making changes to maintain their physical, emotional, and mental health. This podcast is about becoming the best version of ourselves. I hope you feel inspired. Join Bria Spencer and Fadia Jean-Pierre bi-weekly as they initiate conversations about mental health, fitness, and travel. Share this with someone who needs it. Follow us on Instagram at millennial_babes_podcast, and let's continue the conversation. Welcome back to the Millennial Babes Podcast. Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well today and you woke up feeling blessed. Some days we wake up and sit at the edge of our bed wondering, how am I going to face my fear? Not knowing what's going to happen, you find yourself in an unfamiliar place. I want you to join us today as we discuss finding the courage to face your fears with Jay Conze. Jay Conze is a clinical business research consultant, author, mental health advocate, and the host of the We the People podcast. Welcome, Jay. Thank you for coming on our podcast and joining us in this conversation. Is there anything else you want the audience to know about you?
Thank you for having me. First of all, I'm glad to be on here, and I think it's an important topic that we're talking about, because most people suffer from worry in one way or another. No, I think you crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, so I'm good with that.
All right, Jay, I'm so excited you're here. So I found your podcast and I was listening to it, and I was very intrigued by the topic of choice and conversation you were having. And then of course I have it on your live. So as we talk about our fear, and it's really important that we have healthy relationship with ourselves, which is something that you talk about and you touch on. So for me, I feel like when I look at myself in the mirror and I find myself learning things about me that I'm not so happy, I don't like so much, and I'm wow, I never knew I had this belief about myself. So how do you start to look in with yourself and unlearn those things, and when you're uncomfortable, it makes you uncomfortable, and how do you create that space to start learning them so that you can start facing those fears?
Honestly, I definitely think a big part of it is confronting our responses to fight or flight, right? We think it's just something that's kind of automatic, but as with anything else, I mean, we create the relationships we have. Driving is automatic because you've done it so much. So I think really exploring how you respond to certain things, or getting in tune with that, is the first step. Before you can change anything, it's awareness. Mm-hmm. So I think recognizing what you're afraid of and acknowledging it, and even being able to mitigate or redefine those relationships.
How can you redefine those relationships? Sitting with yourself and face those on. Those are challenging things for us to do as human beings, to sit there and have to face them and really sit with ourselves.
Absolutely, and I think it's because a large part is the way we view the world. We view handling things or addressing things as an external need. Anytime you have a problem with someone, it starts with basic conflicts, whether it's friends or at work. You feel the need of, I need to tell them something, and you think you need to set them straight. But the reality is, any conflict is only part of that person and part yourself. So the first thing is really understand. Everything starts with understanding. So what did they say? What is it bothering? Someone could say, man, I ain't got time for you. And, you're upset. You're I don't like the way you talk to me. But in reality, in your life, what did that change? It didn't change your bank statement. It didn't change your employment status. It didn't change the people that love you. So it's really understanding what happened to me. And it's usually not the situation that you're addressing. You usually have to go back. What happened to me that made me attach all this negativity onto these words or this action? I listened to a podcast before. It's actually by NPR. It's called Invisibilia, but it was a couple of years ago. And at the time, my mother was terminally ill with cancer, and we had listened to it, and it really made me think, because it talked about basically we always say things like, you made me upset, right? Or when you did that, that made me mad, as if it's involuntary. But going through the research, basically what they broke down was that when you select, it's like if, I hate to use this example, but for lack of a better word, and because a lot of like my clients are millennials and they can relate to it. So
Yeah.
it's even like, let's say the B word, right? If some people subscribe, like your friend, right? She'll be like, hey, what are you doing, B? And you don't associate anything with it negative because that's your friend. But if, let's say a guy, or you're at a bar, you turn down his advances and he says it, there's a whole different connotation. So it's not the word that has power, it's what we attach to it. So we give everything meaning. So the only reason we say a tree is a tree. Only reason a tree is a tree is because we all agree on that. So I started experimenting when people would say things that I felt were disrespectful. I would take away my feeling from it or not respond, which is hard to do, but it's a process of retraining yourself to recreate the associations that you want to have. That's why, like, sometimes when someone would insult me, it would eventually have no respect. So I would like, all right, and it's not about taking disrespect. It's about you defining what disrespect is. Because most of the time conflict occurs because people say, are you going to let them do that to you? Or let's say you have a problem at work. People come back and give you their feedback and they say, you should feel disrespected by this. Ultimately, it's about, I call it maximum accountability, where you are in control, not just of what you do, but how you choose to feel about everything that is said to you. Nipsey Hussle said something about that, and I thought it was like probably the most profound thing he said. He said, experiment with how you handle disrespect.
Okay.
Because I know for Black men and women in the corporate professional space, that's the biggest thing. Like, you're not going to play me, I'm out of here. Like, you shoot the 10. It's not saying take disrespect. It's experiment how you handle it. Because what I teach, like my clients, especially in the professional setting, is how to use everything to your advantage. If someone slights you, you may want to get retribution right there, but it may be beneficial to your career and your trajectory to use that as a chip, as a cachet. So you have to really be strategic. You can't be strategic and emotional. And you're going to have emotions. So the thing is just separating your emotions from your actions. People think you need to be unemotional or stoic. It's really impossible for a human to be unemotional, but it's possible for your emotions not to reflect in any of your actions.
Mm-hmm. And it's true what you said, that it's really hard to just like separate your emotions sometimes. And that's where like the unhealthy and healthy way of coping, right, with your feelings, like you're looking like, okay, what is the healthy way I am coping with this and managing it, and what is the unhealthy way? And I think we often focus more, or that's what we were learning, we're comfortable with, is how is the unhealthy way of dealing with anything. So like when your emotions get into it, and then you have to like really like get yourself out of it and manage it and say, okay, all right, how is this affecting me? Like, and it's true, like it's hard to separate the two, and it takes a lot of training, which requires a lot of, you have to go within yourself, because you have to kind of figure out, why am I having such a hard time with this? Why can I cope with this in such a positive way? Why is this affecting me this way? And what do I need to change? It's more like you're changing your own habits, because you can't really expect this person and that person to change their way so that it can be okay for you. So like in that sense, like how do you stay focused and limit those unhealthy distractions, like those healthy distractions?
I'm so glad you just said what you said, right? Because what that brings up like a significant point, in the sense that I'm a big believer in cognitive behavioral therapy. For anybody who doesn't really know, I'll just make it simple in layman's terms. Like, we have to get familiar with talking to ourselves, really. Because you'll call a friend, and this is the very danger of navigating a problem off of another person's perspective. You'll call a friend, and we tend to get upset with our friends when they don't give us the feedback that we want. But once you put something out, your words are like social media to me. If your profile is public and you post a picture, you don't know what you can get back. You're literally saying, I'm open to whatever. So if you need something specific back, your friend is not you. They're not going to know. And sometimes you can get a different energy that can taint your process in moving through that. So it's really important to learn to talk to ourselves, because nobody knows what you need to hear better than you. So even if it's self-talk in the mirror sometimes in the morning about, and I personally subscribe to meditation. And people think, oh, it's so hard, I can't do it. Like, how do you do that? I can't get my mind clear. I think that's a big myth. It's not really clearing your mind. You meditate to become a better person, not to get better at meditation. So I really don't ever try to get the problem out of my head. What kills us is the stress we have about solving the problem. And the real truth of the matter is any problem, all right, say, what's today's date? October 22nd or 23rd?
22 is the 25th, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, see, I've clearly been lost. So the 25th, if you look at 2014, October 25th, you probably don't remember one single problem you had that day, or if you do, those problems have either had a solution or resolution. Everything doesn't have a solution, but everything has a resolution. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of with that mindset, when you need something and we're hoping to get it from someone else because we hate depending on ourselves because it feels like a burden. But start with a little self-work in the mirror or even meditation. Instead of just trying to forget about everything, think about the actual situation, not a solution, not how do I get this stress away. Just think through what it's making you feel. And the more understanding you have, the more quick that's why people in relationships say, oh, nothing changed, but I just needed to know how you felt about that. Because understanding doesn't always give clarity, but it always creates calm. You may not be happy with what you know, but it's going to give you a sense. It's going to give you a better sense about the situation. You may not even have the answer you want. That's why closure is so important.
I know for me personally, I've had those challenges where for me, discovering my purpose, I'm wrestling with it and it makes me discover things for myself because I know there's some things I need to change and it's hard. So it's figuring out how to deal with that. That's something I struggle with, I'm wrestling with on a day to day. And I find myself I still struggle with it. And what can you do? How can you deal with it? Especially when you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're saying to yourself, listen, you need to fix this. You need to work on this. You need to find a solution because if you don't, it's not gonna get better. And it's not just with this person, but in the future, you're gonna encounter this situation maybe again or something similar. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, see, the thing about that is I definitely understand your perspective. And that's what a lot of people come with, you need the answer. I try to take it back to school and arithmetic. Someone can show you how to get an answer, necessarily, but you may not have all the steps in a solution for a math problem. So you can get the answer, but you can't show your work. You know what I mean? So we are focused on getting the answer. You get the answer, you get a good grade, but you can't teach anyone what you learned because you just got the answer. So I always look at it and say, don't ever say, okay, you need to fix this. You need to say, what's my work? Because the result is not something you control. Marcus Aurelius always said this. He was a profound Stoic. He said, doing the right thing is the only thing that matters, nothing else. So we focus on the end game and the result, but I've never seen anyone do something consistently with discipline and with good intentions not succeed. Even though they tell you, oh, nice guys, but I've never seen anyone consistently work with good intentions and discipline and not succeed at some point. I've never seen it. It may have happened. It's just like what we talk about, whether things going on politically or whatever space. Nothing, there's no evil or wicked deed. Hitler thought the Third Reich was going to last 3,000 years. It barely lasted 5. I've never seen unjust people prosper infinitely. Sometimes they die and then their reputation comes down. But nothing that isn't done the right way will last the test of time. You look at Rome, you look at whatever you want to look at. History has shown us
that. Yeah, definitely. So
that's interesting because from what I'm hearing, you said a lot, we always go to others to seek how they can help us or resolve our problem. And then really all it takes is looking in the mirror. But sometimes it's hard to face even your own fears. and becoming real with yourself. And I've learned that at the end of the day, we are the ones that hold the answers to our own problems as well. And so that's where like the inner work starts to come into play, and your shadow work, and realizing, okay, maybe there are some traumas, and it's not more so about what the person is saying, but how you react to it as well. And then there's certain triggers that come up. So how does someone like deal with all of that? Like they're finally at a place where like, okay, I can't get it from anybody else. It's really truly up to me, but there's a lot that's coming up.
This may sound like a little extreme, but this is the route that I had to go. I spent a lot of time at like Buddhist temples, and it's something that you said literally they talk in a way they don't realize it, but that's why I said these principles have been with us throughout time. I mean, the main premise they always say is seek within, which is pretty much shadow work and self work if you break it down conceptually. Another big thing is the middle passage. And I think because subconsciously we're always trying to get our way. The middle way is a principle where there's, let's say me and you are in any type of exchange, whether it's a conflict or just a negotiation. The principle of the middle way is I don't want my way and I don't want your way. I'm not looking for either one of us to get our way. I'm looking for the best way forward for both of us. So what that ensures is that you're always in a good spot. And I think tying that back into your actual question is we kind of have to fall out of love with ourselves. And what I mean by that is these things are so hard, and it's hard to look at ourselves because we associate, we don't want to associate anything negative with ourselves, even though we feel negatively about ourselves. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I don't want to be selfish. And inherently, all human beings have a certain level of selfishness. It allows us to function. It allows us to thrive. It's not just a bad thing. Or like, if you tell someone they have a trigger, don't tell me I'm being triggered. It's because we're afraid to own anything negative. But it's like pH. You need some toxicity. Well, I shouldn't say toxicity. You need a certain level of acidity, to bring balance. So it's about us being able to fall out of love with ourselves. And I never say emotional detachment. Mm-hmm. That's too extreme. That's not natural. But emotional separation, like where we're able to look at ourselves. It's like people who have conflicts with their parents, because sometimes they build them up to like superheroes. But when you're able to see them as a person, as you mature, that's why those relationships tend to come back in, because you're able to recognize flaws and incongruencies and still take a look at the whole. So if we can separate from having to, I don't want to be wrong, or was I mean, where we realize these are just decisions and choices. If we can separate, I think it's a little bit of Judeo-Christian judgment sometimes on our actions. If we can just look at ourselves separate from what's right, what's wrong, and understand decisions and perspectives, it starts there. So I think not being afraid to be triggered, not being afraid. You cannot be a hero unless you're willing to accept being a villain. And I think we always want to be the hero. So anytime there's a narrative that plays us as the villain, it causes so much conflict, and we can't go there. So that's why we can't go into those spaces.
That is so true, because I think one of the things that I've learned too is just that I overextend myself. And so it's that people pleasing, but without even knowing. And so I think a lot of people have that human trait where they want to please other people, and they kind of like box themselves in, or they move a certain way because they don't want to come off in a different perception. And so I think you have to get to a point where you do have to be a little bit selfish and be okay with that, and not worry about what others are saying, so that you can innately grow yourself.
And I think that's what I personally I'm struggling with, is the perception. And like you said, you have to be okay being triggered and to unlove yourself. Jay, how am I supposed to do that? That's like you asking me to go within myself. I need to find the courage. that it takes courage to do that. To go be like, you know what, you want to trigger, this is triggering me. That's okay. But yes, I know being triggered, it's just letting you know, like for yourself, like this thing triggers me, and I need to understand why is it trigger. Which of course it requires you to go back within, right? You need to go look at yourself, but to like unlove yourself in that process, that takes courage. Like how do you do that? How do you face it? But also with you, like, what experience do you have around that? Like, what guidance can you give someone to say, okay, all right, this is how you need to unlove yourself and be okay with your triggers, but also like, so that way you can be this person you want to be and how to deal with these type of problems or past traumas?
I wish I had an easier way to say it, but typically where this occurs is going to be in the space of either, and I say this a lot, but it's like, no one ever says like what really transformed you or what like made you as a person. No one says, it was a beautiful vacation to Tulum and it just really changed my life. Yeah, it's always some type of pain or conflict or loss. So it's literally you find these things, or you start even being able to challenge these things when you're stripped of everything else. Like I think there's references in every aspect of culture. In the Bible, they talk about it. They're like, you like Moses, like, he was in the desert with nothing. He wouldn't come to that realization as a prince, living it. So it's literally, you have to have everything stripped away from you, or you have to go through, and sometimes it's in a relationship. Sometimes it could be the loss of a loved one or a parent, but there's going to be something that's going to disrupt the homeostasis. It's like in theater. They say a play doesn't start until Deus ex machina. So it's basically when it's like everything's perfect, everything's fine, something comes down and interrupts that. And that's the beginning of action, and that's where the play starts, because you need conflict. So we try to avoid conflict so much. We're like, I don't want to have an argument. I'm not trying to be upset. It's because we think conflict means hurting someone else. Conflict just means two opposing thoughts. Like, people are not okay with cognitive dissonance. Like, you ever be like, I had friends and they're like, well, I don't agree with that. I'm like, that's okay. I can accept you not agreeing. And that causes so much conflict for them because they don't know how to live with the duality. So sometimes people won't accept you just because you're okay with certain things. And it's not even about you. And that's why you don't even have a problem with them. But that makes them aware. The worst thing you can do for someone who is not prepared to live in the truth or acknowledge themselves is put them around someone who does it religiously. They'll want to be by them. It's like moths to a flame. It's literally going to kill them, but they're drawn to it. And that's why I've noticed a lot of good people, they may have like their friend network. There's going to be some friends that have resentment towards them. And I talk to my clients a lot about this because that's the most dangerous place, because what you do is you have someone who has the benefit of someone on your inner circle, but also the intent at times of one of your enemies. That's a very dangerous spot to put that in. But that's all about managing ourselves. But yeah, you basically need conflict. You need conflict. And it's a willingness that's going to come from having no other choices. Because as humans, we're not going to just naturally do it. Very few people, even if you get wealthy, you either need a profound loss or a profound sense of emptiness. Those places come all the way at the top and all the way at the bottom. So it's either someone at the height of their success where they've indulged everything they can indulge, and they recognize that there's a certain level of unfulfillment, but you can't tell people that until they get it. So that's the top and the bottom.
It's so funny you say that, because I was listening to your podcast episode, Disruption and Purpose, and you mentioned that there's 3 areas in your life. There's like your personal romantic life, your professional life, and your inner self. And if one is disrupted, then it leads to the other disruptions in your life. And that hit me because I remember in the past, like everything would be going fine. Like career was going well, my family is good and healthy, but my love life was in shambles. And I'm just like, I don't understand. And then it would shift. And then all of a sudden work wasn't going well and it was stressing me out, and I was just depressed and not knowing what to do, and then trying to figure out what my calling and purpose was. And then all of a sudden health and family started to shift and change. So it was like a triple effect. And then you had your split rock moment where, you know, either it was a really bad breakup and a heartbreak that really brought me to be aware, like, okay, what do I really want for my own self, and how can I face my own fears, and how come I didn't, you know, make certain decisions and speak up during conflicts. And then even just more like recently having my dad pass away in April, that's like a split rock moment where that catapulted me in really defining my purpose and who I am and going into my calling. And so having like those different perspectives and just how fear plays a role in all of that, and knowing yourself, really just, it's eye-opening, and it's also like a rebirth process.
Yeah, rebirth, I think is the perfect way to put it. I commend you on working through that situation, having been there, you know, like multiple times myself. Um, it's a profound loss because, um, and I like to say, especially if it was a good relationship, um, um, it, it 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 redefines things in a way that not much else does. And the reason for that is, there are very few things that you've kind of had readily available to you from when you enter this world. So I think it usually signals a different journey, like you said, a split rock moment. Um, and the answers that you come away from that usually wind up defining the rest of your life. You spoke about like breakups, and I thought that was really interesting too, because what I've noticed is people will miss um, they will miss things that didn't even make them feel good, or situations where they weren't even happy. And you know, it kind of speaks to understanding of ourselves. And I think sometimes uh, the comfort and the feeling of authenticity um, can do more to keep us complacent, or like we can get attached to that more than actually being authentic. Because being authentic is not, people always tout it and talk about it like it's powerful and it's great. Like, you know, dealing with that loss, acknowledging it in every area of your life. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there were times where you felt like you didn't have that 110% to give in your work life, you know, dealing with the loss of a parent, you know. And and I had to explain. I had some clients, and they were like, you know, they had bad relationships with their parents. I was like, look, even if you have cancer, pancreatic cancer, and you have to have your pancreas removed, the pancreas is not doing anything for you, but you're still going to feel the loss from having it taken out of you.
Yes.
You know, we're made up of. I think Obama said it best. Like, you know, sons are shaped by their fathers, either their presence or their absence, but irrevocably their shape.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's not something we can escape from.
No, we can't. We definitely can't. And like just listening to the both of you guys talk about this, it's like conflict for me is huge. I came from someone like who doesn't like conflict, and I find myself like, no, you gotta face this conflict. And I get to a point where I'm like, okay, this is enough for me. Like I know when to be like, when to pull away. And then I have others who's like, no, we need to deal with this. Like it needs to be dealt right now. So for me, like I find myself like I get like tense and I go within and I shut down, because it's like, I know this is not going to go anywhere. So until we like, I need to be like at balance. I need to like bring myself down. I need you to bring yourself down. Because like conflict is very difficult to deal with other people. And I like how the both of you guys are talking about how to deal with those things, especially when you lost someone, and to come into that and to deal with that. Like for me, I don't know how to like move past that. So like for me, I shut down, and that's something like I'm fighting with myself to do, because I know like it's not them that needs to fix it for me. I need to fix it. I need to work on it, and I'm working on it, and I'm challenging myself to deal with it. But sometimes the outcome is just not it's not positive, and it's always like, you know, I don't get you. And I'm like, for me, it's like, it's okay. Like, I don't know how else to make it. I don't know how else to make you get me, but I know, like, this is something that I need to go back, I need to reflect on, and I need to work on for myself.
Well, something you said there made me think, and I think you actually do have a process. I think it is a healthy thing, like you said, when these emotions are strong, and you don't. And some people say, no, you need to be able to talk about this now, and it makes you think there's something wrong, that you're not ready. But I think, like I mentioned before, taking that space and that time, I think maybe you just may need to communicate that you need that space and that time. But that's the most beneficial thing. Otherwise, you're just speaking from feelings that you have that you may not even have tomorrow. So I think that is a good thing, to recognize that you need time and to take those moments. So then because people will say, people ask you, what do you think, right? And they substitute with, how do you feel? What do you think? Like they're the same thing. How you feel is something you can always answer immediately, because it's just an emotion. It's not always beneficial to talk about. But when people say, well, what do you think about this? And they kind of mean your feelings. Or sometimes when someone asks me, what do I think? And it's an emotionally charged situation, I say, I'm going to need some time to really think about how I feel about that. I need some time to think about my thoughts on that, because I can tell you how I feel, but this is a more important issue than just my feelings, because I got to if I'm using my thoughts, and I'm using intellect, and I'm going deeper and thinking about what this means to me and you, and what it means moving forward, and the context in which I want to carry that. So there's a lot more considerations. So, if someone's pressing you, well, they need answers. Sometimes you really can say, and I think it's a healthy thing to say, I need some time to think about it, so I can really tell you what I think about it, and not just what I feel about it. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think that's not I think you have a process there. Maybe if another person to understand that, it just might have to be communicated. But I think that's a fairly healthy process. You might know, like, I'm charged up, like, you're going to get nothing but smoke right now. So
no, you're not.
Yeah, so I'm going to take some time, let the smoke clear, and then we'll see what we have.
Yes. And the other thing is, like, okay, I think about it. I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that serious. Like, I was making a big deal. I was making it a thing. You know what, Claudia? Like, go sit somewhere. You don't need to do all this extra stuff. Like, you need to move on. And sometimes it's like, no, we need to have a conversation. So, like, I struggle with that when I move on, when I deal with it, when I process it, because I have, like you said, I have, like, the process, and then I'm like, it's okay. But then it's a cycle, right? Like, we have to break. We have to like move away from.
Absolutely. I would take it to extremes where if I had a problem with someone, I wouldn't even go as far back as to say I would remove ownership from other people, just so I could start being in control of my life, because like, we're all different people in different chapters. So I had a narrative where I was like a lot more volatile of a person, and I had two younger siblings that I'm raising. So you start thinking about, like, what you want to articulate to them about, what masculine, because I think we define, like, masculinity as actions. You need to be a man. And I realized from a teenager, I was doing things that a man does, but I was not a man at all. So I realized manhood or masculinity is less of an action, but more of a thought process, because an action can come from many different places. So we always say, a real man does this, but it's really what a real man thinks. Like, even if you're like, I told my younger brothers about women, because this is a big part of male identity. They'll say that, oh, men love sex, or, like, a man's weakness is women. And I've come to understand that a man's weakness isn't women. A man's weakness is how he sees himself, and that will manifest in his relationship with women.
Oh, okay.
So that makes, so if a man, or even for a woman, if they see themselves, I guess, like, so if someone cheats, is that more so because of how they think of themselves and not being worthy enough?
It could, well, see, now it's definitely tied to self. Like, it's like when people lie, like when man or woman lies, so people say, "Oh, you lied to me." What I realized is that they're not lying to you; they're lying to themselves.
Mm.
Now they tell you, and the reason they're lying to themselves is because they do not like their reality, or there are some terms about their existence and their place in the world, or their current position that they're not willing to accept. So they tried, and it's too painful or unhappy for them to live in. So they try to create an alternate reality, and it cannot be real unless someone else believes it. So they just need you to buy in. So the lie has very little to do with you, but we tend to take ownership. And that's why I say most people, we usually make things about ourselves, but they have nothing to do with us.
Right. And it's
Now
like,
you are a victim.
mm-hmm. I was saying, like, right. And it's like a way of coping to escaping your own reality and your own pain, when really you have to really sit back and look at yourself and go back to the inner work and what those fears are, so that you can face your reality and change your ways.
Absolutely. And it's hard to do. That's why therapy is
Mm-hmm.
important. No one's
Yes.
going to get up in the morning and say, oh, I'm playing 3 women and I'm not really giving my all at work. I need to really just break myself down today and assess this. No, they wake up and say, is my life comfortable? Am I taking care of people? Am I making enough money? It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
If you're not in self-actualization, you won't think about it.
Right. Exactly.
Goes right back to it.
So one of the other things, Jay, that I heard through your podcast episode that really resonated was that when finding your purpose, sometimes there's fear that comes up. But you mentioned the importance of knowing your internal reason, which is knowing your I before you know your we or us. Elaborate on that for someone who is unclear about what that is.
It goes back to your why.
Mm.
Why will carry you or let you know when you need to stop? I think it's good because it's never a bad thing. It just really helps you identify your purpose. Once your why you're doing it doesn't meet the threshold of all the annoyance and frustration of having to do it, that lets you know that this may be a desire instead of purpose. And there's nothing wrong with having desires. It's just recognizing the difference between desire and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
A desire is usually something you want very badly. I always try to identify a purpose as something you want, but something that others would need from you, or that the world needs from you. It's like I use ikigai. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's a Japanese principle. It takes what you love, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs from you. Those 4 quadrants, the point in where they all touch, that's your reason for ikigai means reason for being. So that's your purpose. Where all those things kind of connect, that usually helps people find, like, especially in the professional space, that helps you identify your purpose, what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs from you, and what you can support yourself doing. But we all know you can support yourself doing anything, depending on what sacrifices you're willing to make and how hard you're willing to go. But that's what I always use.
Right. And I think for me, it took me 10 years to find my purpose. And so initially, when I went to college, you grow up and in our culture, like, you can either be a lawyer or a doctor.
Yes.
And so
Nurse, lawyer, doctor, yeah.
right.
Social work is nowhere in there.
Social worker is nowhere in there. So imagine me telling my parents, I'm not going to law school. I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to be a social worker. They were like, what? You're not going to make no money in that. But for me, it was really more so I started to become more aware of what is my passion and what do I really care about and what are my gifts. And so I realized that I really enjoy helping other people. As a lawyer, I felt like I couldn't get that on a more intimate level and be able to guide people in empowering them and finding their own resolutions to their problems and facing all of their fears and traumas. And so I said, okay, well, why not? I'm going to become a social worker. And that's when I feel like my journey started. And I began to craft, okay, what it is that I really want to do. And even throughout those years, just praying and asking God, okay, I know this is what I want to do in the career that I'm in, but I know that there is more for me to do. So how can I use my gifts and my voice to help other people? And that slowly started to come over the years, but even still going through pain and loss, whether it was through a breakup or loss of a loved one, and really molding who I am and still listening to what was being told to me through prayer or even through meditation. And so not a lot of people know that, or some people are fearful that it's going to take too long. Like, what? It took you 10 years? But it's all about your journey and your story. So for someone who is in this space where they're beginning to hear and see the signs of, okay, these are my gifts and I think this is supposed to be my purpose, but I'm afraid. What would you say to guide them to step into that power?
Well, first, I have to shout you out because 10 years to find your purpose is a really short amount of time. So, like, like if you're doing 10 years, you're doing good. Because, Pablo Picasso was writing, like, this was when he was, like, near death. He was writing, he was drawing on a napkin in a restaurant. And the waitress said, "Oh, that's beautiful. Let me have that." And then he said $30,000. She was like, "It took you a minute to draw that." He said, "No, it took me my whole life." So I look at it a little bit different. I think all the places and the detours and all that stuff that we think was like it took me, I think that was part of it. I always say that everything happens. I don't say everything happens for a reason because everything that happens has a purpose, even the things that should have never happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with that because for me it was I was everywhere at one point, whether it was gangs in the streets. So it was an odyssey. By the time I went to college, even though I was still young, but just based experientially, I was like already a grown man. Like, I don't have children of my own, but I was taking care of my family. So, it's a different lifestyle and mindset, when you transition from adolescence to operating as an adult, So, this journey is, it's everything, it's all the stuff that you think, like in college, you'll always say, why am I taking this class that has nothing to do?
Right.
That was
me.
me.
I never said that because I'd be like, there's always some type of skill. Like, even if it's an unrelated class, I'm never gonna do anything in anthropology, but you might just have to learn how to work in a group. Or the biggest skill you may have is working on a project that you have no interest in.
Right.
Doing things that you don't like is a skill you're going to need in your life, professional reasons, in your relationships. There's going to be parts of things or, why do we have to go here? If you don't, and I think that's the biggest difference in society that's changing. Like, even if you look at like social media, everything, like your purpose and what people need to do is learn how to do things you don't want to do, but not just learn how to do them begrudgingly. Learn how to do them with vigor. Like, all you have to do is identify, if you can find one thing you can connect to, like, okay, I don't like this, I don't care about any of this, but I do like representing myself well, or I want to learn how to communicate effectively with people. So, whether it's keeper of records, you have to find a small joy in anything. And it's possible to find a small joy in everything. So that's why it's really important about perspective. So, like, the big question is just really, how are you going to choose to see the world? We think it's hard. Like, oh my gosh, like, what do you tell someone? There's no strategy. It's literally just, how are you choosing to look at life? You can see the things that you don't want, the things you don't like, the things that are missing, or you can see what you can create. Or like, I'm going to take this, or this class, they don't like that, but I'm going to structure the group, or let's turn this project into something we can perform. Find a way to, instead of just seeing where you don't fit, you find a way to bring yourself in.
Yes, I completely agree with that. It's a mind shift. How can you see a little bit of joy in something that can be greater than what it is, even if you don't like it? Because everything is a life lesson and shapes like who you are and your journey. I would say yes, it took me 10 years to find my purpose, but I also still feel like I'm crafting it. Like, it's so weird. Like, I feel like I'm still in the midst of like I'm deep learning, and it feels good and exciting at the same time. But sometimes self-doubt creeps in it, and then I get scared. Like, wait a minute, I don't know. But I think I'm just gonna keep on going, and I'm gonna keep on pushing and to see where it goes. And then the more you trust the process, trust where you are, um, the outcome and what you see and get in return is amazing.
And that's what I'm like learning for myself too. It's like, as you talk about like the fears, like it's going within to like work on those areas, like the unhealthy habits that we have, the unhealthy way of coping with things. Like, okay, for me to like find my purpose, for me to walk in it, because that is already in me. It's like I need to deal with those things for me to like shift my mindset, like for me to be on the other side to walk towards that, because it's not easy at all. And find, like with what you said earlier, you got to unlove yourself. It's almost like to love yourself, you got to unlove yourself. You got to unlearn those things to start to love the person you want to be, to desire the person you want to be, to walk in that purpose, to become this person. And so it's like, it's a lot in the background work that you have to do so that you can be in the forefront of it.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a case that we're always becoming. I don't ever think it's a destination like, oh, I'm this person. I think
Never.
once we accept that we're always going to experience self-doubt, like me, occasionally it'll be imposter syndrome because, you can be sitting at a table with a bunch of scientists and then you're
Yes.
like, if they knew I used to rob people, like they would, like, it's just like, this is not like, it's like, but saying all that to say, it's literally like you can convince yourself, you can create anything you can convince yourself of. I was like, I didn't have a science background, but I said I wanted to be in this space. People respond to storytelling. Whether it's in relationships, job interviews, people, oh, my resume. I was like, the reason you're sitting there is because you have requisite skills. It's about crafting a narrative. And I
Yes.
learned the power of storytelling. And it put me in rooms that some people probably think I should never be in, or it creates opportunity. Like, I hate to say it, but perception is reality. It only becomes reality once you perceive it. So you really have to, it's just like I said, you if you can see it and plan it, then it can happen.
Yep.
Just see it, but you got to see it and plan it, and it can happen.
It's like a mustard seed.
Literally.
Just plant it, and it'll grow.
Literally.
Mm.
I like that. I like that. Crafting your narrative.
Yeah, and people come to me with technical resume advice. I give them some, but it's not really about that. I tell them it's like, and shadow mentors, especially when I'm talking to like a lot of black men, they may want to do something, they don't see anyone around. I was like, the mentors I didn't have, I created. There's enough information about someone doing something that you want to do. So I would cobble together that. And like when I would sit down in front of interview with people, I would go between their Facebook, their LinkedIn. So I knew this person to a certain degree. They like rushing. Information is power. So that's why you need to know as much. You need to know as much as you can about yourself to become powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And we always just look at it externally, like, yeah, information is power. I need to study this and that. Yeah, you can become an expert at that, but what can you do with that once you become an expert on yourself?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jay. Like, this was so much fun. Like, I'm learning a lot, and it's definitely giving me, it's broadening on my perspective on how I view things, and knowing that what I'm doing, like, I'm on the right path. Like, I'm actually like doing the work, and I'm like, with the process, and I'm definitely changing my narrative. And it's been fun. Like, I've been enjoying it, and I'm like being, everything's being thrown at me, and I'm like, I'm here. I'm ready to tackle it. So, is there anything you want to leave us with? Because we're going to end with a wild card segment. So is there anything you want to leave our audience with?
Just anything that you're thinking of, no matter how outlandish it is, think about pursuing it. You know, we miss so much great stuff out there because we don't think we deserve it. If you can think of it, it's in your reach. Everything arises from thoughts.
True. Thank you. So let's do a wild card question. So this is a fun part. So don't be nervous.
No, I'm okay with fun. I do fun.
Yeah, so we like to do this with all of our guests just to, make it a little more fun, spice things up. It's called our wild card segment. So we have 10 questions and you just pick a number 1 through 10.
Okay, 6.
All right. What's the wildest thing you ever done?
Jeez. I don't even know what I consider wild anymore. Well, yeah, I do. Okay, so I flew a plane without any license or any training.
What?
Yeah, I was in Belize, and they had like the pilot was like 17 on one, those like one engine planes, small one, and I convinced him to let me co-pilot. I mean, it was a little shaky. Like, I think there was maybe just 2 different times I almost killed everyone. It was like 8 people on there, but after that, it was pretty smooth sailing. But I think that's the craziest thing because, like, I kept getting on the thing and being like, "I'm the captain now."
Oh no, that's like out of a
scare. Yeah. It was. I don't know if I would have done it again, but at the time, I just took my chances. So I would say that was pretty crazy because we were over open water.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. You're not gonna catch me doing that, but I'm happy you had the opportunity to enjoy and experience it. Not for me.
Okay, yeah, I can understand that.
Maybe one day. I don't know. Maybe one day. All right. So where can everybody find you, Jay?
I'm on Instagram at Podcast We the People, as well as I think email Jay, the number 4 We the People at gmail.com. Definitely can leave comments. Always encourage interaction, and hopefully we talk again. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, this was amazing.
Definitely. All right, thank you guys for listening. If anything resonated with you guys today during our episode, leave us a comment. If you'd like to be our guest or want to suggest a topic for us to talk about, email us at millennialbabespodcast